Anything in which the bodies were bent, or kink, particularly a woman's body, which might prohibit the movement of the seed, not so good. No kinky sex, thank you very much. Hello, I'm Ruth Goodman, and today we'll be talking about Tudor marriage. When it came to sex, the Tudors had plenty to say about what was acceptable, what wasn't, and how it should be controlled. We'll explore a world full of complexity and contradiction. Marriage was seriously important to people in Tudor Britain, as much as anything because it marked the moment of adulthood. A single person wasn't considered to be fully adult. No matter how old you were, if you were a bachelor or a spinster, you weren't really completely grown up. It was only at marriage that you took on the responsibilities and the status of a fully fledged adult in Tudor society. Marriage was central to survival too. Man or woman, it was extremely hard to cope on your own. You sort of needed the meshing together of the two sets of traditional skills in order to be able to cope. You needed someone who could plough alongside someone who could milk. You needed someone who could manage the sheep as well as someone who could manage the poultry. You needed someone who could grow the corn, and you needed someone who could brew the beer. At every level, you needed this meshing of the traditional skills in order to have everything necessary for bringing up a family, but even for surviving yourself. And when people lost their marriage partner, when they were widowed, you can see that life was very hard for them. Men who lost their wives generally remarried within months because whether their heart was in it or not, they needed someone with the female practical skills to be able to carry on. In some ways, women were slightly less vulnerable. If they were widowed, they did at least have the sort of skills for making food and drink, even if they were horribly short of money. Marriage was a union. A building block in society. It was how you brought together the resources to bring up a family. It was considered to be the union, the building block that allowed everything else to flow. Many people talked about other institutions in terms of marriage. They saw it as a sort of reflection of the natural order. It was deeply important to people as a structure. And hopefully the individuals involved would grow to love one another. They might even start out loving one another. And that was the ideal. But if there wasn't much love, you might still need marriage in a practical sense. Many people left a lot of the decision about who they should marry to their families. It might be an alliance. And although we might think, yes, the rich need to do that, but the poor surely don't. But no, it was equally important for the poor. If you've not got very much, then it really makes sense that your marriage partner is going to be somebody who's got at least the skills, that they are a good match, if not in goods, at least they are in personality and temperament. Somebody who, for example, might be hardworking is a good match, whereas somebody who is lazy is not a good match. So at every level of society, there is a sort of a bit of tension between the practical needs of survival and the feelings of the heart. Now, legally, a wedding needed to be very little indeed. All it needed to boil down to was an agreement by a man and a woman in front of a witness. So if you said, I will marry you, or I do marry you, and the other person said, yes, I marry you, and you did it in front of a witness, that's it. You are married. Now, the church didn't like that as a position and is trying to insist that it has to happen under their purview, that it has to happen with a member of the church clergy present, and that there is a formal ceremony to go through. But legally, all it required was the agreement to marry between the two and a witness. This could lead to an awful lot of disputed and contested weddings. And gradually over time it gets a bit tighter and tighter and tighter as church and state control it a bit more. But there are many instances in Tudor Britain where a young couple can say, no, but we've already married, thank you very much, without anybody else being involved. Now, sex itself was considered to be a good thing within marriage, so long as it fulfilled one of two purposes. One was to bond a couple together, and the other was the procreation of children. And the ideas about the nature of marriage and the nature of people's bodies mean that these facts led to a preference for certain sexual positions, for example. So, it's thought in the Tudor period that a woman's reproductive organs are a mirror image of a man's, but just internally. And that if you want to have children, you should have a nice straight line to allow the seed to get where it needs to go. So a straight position was considered to be the right thing to do. Anything that encouraged procreation, that helped to make a baby, would be good sex within marriage. So missionary position, as we might call it these days, is ultimately what people were looking for. Anything in which the bodies were bent, or kink, particularly a woman's body, which might prohibit the movement of the seed, not so good. No kinky sex, thank you very much. Then there are ideas about the seed itself. Tudor ideas of anatomy say that the vein that comes from the right-hand side of the heart carries fresh, clean, vigorous blood, that it moves around the body in a circle, so that the right-hand side of the body receives more vigour, more strength than the left. And this applies to testicles too. The right-hand testicle will therefore produce male seed, and the left-hand testicle will therefore produce female seed. So if you needed to conceive a boy child, it was a good idea to tie a ribbon around the left-hand testicle, just to ensure that the correct seed made the journey. So what did Tudors think was sexy? Well, linen comes quite high up the list. That layer that sits next to the skin, that intimacy between you and your clothes, the bits that touch a body. More than that, though, hair, women's hair, such a lust-inducing thing. Women are normally completely have their hair tucked away in a cap. A woman's hair is her crowning glory and her husband's delight. It is a private sexual pleasure between husband and wife, not something to be shown to any old person. And as for men, well, a nicely turned calf, thank you very much. Think of those stockings showing off the shape of a leg. Can be pretty sexy. The basic Tudor moral picture was that sex inside marriage is generally a good thing, and that sex outside marriage is always a bad thing. It doesn't matter what sort of sex it is. If it's not within marriage, it is bad. Relationships between same-sex partners, bad. Relationships with a mistress, bad. Relationships with an animal, very bad. Relationships that do not fall within the traditional marriage picture of a man and a woman within marriage creating babies, bad. Interestingly, though, people didn't really separate it out. They sort of like, if you were the sort of person who would break the rules, who would have sex outside marriage, then clearly no holds barred. When the Tudors wish to picture a man who is behaving badly, they often picture him with a female partner on one arm and a male partner on the other. They don't really see homosexuality as a thing, they just see it as bad sex, and they're equally annoyed about it. Henry VIII actually passes a law that for the first time makes male homosexuality illegal. But interestingly, there are only a handful of prosecutions. For most people, it simply wasn't an issue. After all, sharing a bed was normal. Most people did. Within a household, if there were children and male servants, it was normal for them to share a bed. Likewise for female servants and female children. If you went to an inn, you quite often ended up sharing a bed with a same-sex stranger. Sharing a bed for warmth and companionship was a normal part of society, so it was quite hard to separate out anything else. I hope you enjoyed today's video. This was the final episode of my series on life in the 16th century, but you can find all previous episodes, as well as my previous 6-part video series on life in Victorian Britain, over on the History Extra app.